I texted the family group chat at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Surgery's coming up. Just need someone there when I wake up. 3 people in that chat: my mother, my sister, my husband of 7 years. I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear, appear and disappear. My phone sat on the bathroom counter, my reflection in the mirror above it looking steady. Calm, like a woman asking for something small. The first response came from Mom. "Of course, honey, which hospital?" Then nothing from the other 2 for 12 minutes. I already knew what that silence meant. I'd learned to read silence the way other people read books. It was a language, and it spoke volumes. My sister finally texted, "Can't that week, work thing." My husband didn't respond at all. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not until 3 days later, when he casually mentioned during breakfast that he had a golf thing scheduled. He didn't know which day the surgery was. I never told him. He just assumed it would be inconvenient and blocked the entire week preemptively. That's when I knew for certain. Everything I'd suspected, everything I'd felt crawling under my skin like an infection for the past 18 months, crystallized into a single, cold fact. I was alone. Not because they didn't love me. That would have been simpler. I was alone because they were planning something, and they knew I was getting close to finding out. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a forensic accountant. I was 34 years old when my life split into a before and an after, though I didn't recognize the exact moment it happened. You never do. It's always clearer in retrospect, a way of looking at someone, a pause before answering a direct question, a phone number in your partner's contacts under a man's first name when that man has a wife. For 6 months before that surgery text, I'd been quietly losing my mind. Not in the way people usually mean it. I wasn't falling apart. I wasn't crying at work or forgetting to shower or watching my life collapse like a house of cards. I was doing the opposite. I was becoming sharper, colder, more precise. Every cell in my body had gotten the message that something was very wrong, and my mind had responded by shifting into a state of hyperfocus that was almost like meditation. I lived in Portland, in a 3-bedroom house in the Laurelhurst neighborhood that David and I had bought 3 years ago. The house was beautiful in the way that houses look beautiful in real estate photos: clean lines, an open floor plan, stainless steel appliances. A place designed to showcase success. The mortgage was $385,000. We had a little over $200,000 in equity. I worked for Chen, Martinez and Associates, a mid-sized forensic accounting firm where I'd been a senior investigator for 4 years. My salary was $127,000 annually, plus a small bonus. My benefits were excellent. My job was secure. I was the kind of woman who'd been told her whole life that she'd done everything right. David was a commercial real estate broker. He made more than I did, somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000 on average, though his income fluctuated with the market. This was important information. This was the kind of detail that would matter later. We met at a networking event in 2016. I remember thinking he was beautiful in an understated way: sandy hair, blue eyes, the kind of face that looked equally comfortable in a boardroom or on a hiking trail. He was charming without being oleaginous. He listened when you talked, or at least he made you feel like he was listening. My family loved him immediately. My mother, Helen, saw in David the son-in-law she'd always wanted. She was a retired teacher who'd spent most of her life trying to manage other people's chaos and appreciated David's apparent competence and straightforwardness. My sister, Michelle, who is 3 years younger than me and works in marketing, saw him as the kind of man who could protect her younger sister, even though I'd never needed protecting and had built a career specifically on the back of not needing anyone's help. They both saw in David what I saw in David: a good man, a stable man, a man who wanted to build a life, not live one. That feeling lasted approximately 4 years. The first thing I noticed was the American Express black card. I noticed it because David started using it instead of the joint visa we'd had for years. When I asked about it, he said it was a business thing, a a status symbol, something he needed for his work. I accepted this. I accepted a lot of things without question because I was busy and I trusted him, and because I'd been raised to believe that marriages required a certain amount of faith. The second thing I noticed was the schedule changes. David had always been someone who worked regular hours with maybe 1 or 2 client dinners a month. Starting around month 9 of the previous year, so roughly 14 months before I texted the surgery message, his calendar started filling up with late meetings, last-minute showings, weekend business trips to Seattle or San Francisco. Nothing unusual for a real estate agent. Entirely reasonable, entirely explainable, and entirely false. I didn't know it was false at first. I just knew that something felt wrong. It was a vibration in the air, a frequency only certain people can detect. I've always been sensitive to those frequencies. It's probably why I'm good at my job. I can look at a spreadsheet and know when the numbers have been manipulated. I can read the spacing of text in a document and know when it's been edited. I can understand on some level that operates below consciousness when someone is lying. The third thing I noticed was the money. In January of the previous year, David and I had roughly $18,000 in our joint checking account. This was normal for us. We paid our bills from this account, maintained a buffer, and kept the rest in savings. On the 1st of February, I happened to check the balance while logging a deductible medical expense for tax purposes. The balance was $8,400. I called him immediately. My heart was running fast. My hands were shaking, because even then, even before I knew what I was actually looking for, some part of me understood that this was significant. "David, did you transfer money out of the joint account?" There was a pause, a half second, not enough that anyone else would notice, but I noticed. "Yeah, I moved some money to the business account," he said. "We talked about that, remember? I mentioned cash flow was tight with the market downturn." We had not talked about that, but I said, "Right, of course, how much?" "Around 10 grand, he said. "I'll move it back when the spring sale's close, you know how it is." I said I understood, and I let him go, and I sat at my desk with my phone in my hand and realized that my husband had just lied to me. Not about the money. He was probably being truthful about that, but about the conversation. We had never discussed transferring money. He had made that decision unilaterally and was now gaslighting me into believing we'd agreed to it. I pulled up our calendar. I looked back through text messages. I checked my email and his email, which I had access to for household management purposes, a detail that would become important. I found nothing about any discussion of cash flow or business account transfers. That night, I started keeping a log. I wrote down the date, the lie, and my evidence. I did this carefully, methodically, the way I'd been trained to document findings in my professional work. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I kept doing it anyway, because the part of me that had heard that pause in David's voice knew something was wrong. Over the next 12 months, the log grew. February, American Express black card appears, asks about it. Vague answers, no statements provided. March, works late 4 times, says he's showing properties. I drive by the address he mentions. No lights on in the office. No cars in the lot. April, finds receipt from restaurant I don't recognize. It's for 2 people. Total, $147. When I ask about it, he says it was a client dinner and he forgot to mention it. But his calendar doesn't show a client meeting that day. May, he starts going to the gym before work. Says he wants to get healthier. I'm supportive. But his gym bag smells like a perfume I don't wear. June, I notice a second phone in his car. A basic one, nothing fancy. When I ask about it, he says it's an old backup phone he forgot was there. I believe him because I want to believe him. July, money transfers continue. He's moved approximately $35,000 from the joint account to an account I now know is in his name only. He claims these are business expenses. He says the account is for his real estate investments, separate from his brokerage firm's business account. He says I wouldn't understand how commercial real estate works. He says a lot of things. August, I find a receipt for a hotel room in Salem. It's dated during a time when he said he was at a commercial real estate conference in Portland. The hotel room was booked for 2 nights. I call the hotel. I say I'm researching a discrepancy in his business expenses. They can't confirm guest names, but they confirm the room was charged to his American Express card. September, my sister and I grab lunch. I mention casually that David has been stressed about work. She looks at me with an expression I can't quite read and says, "Yeah, I bet." I ask her what she means. She backtracks immediately, says nothing. But I know she knows something. October, I finally confront him. It's late evening. We're in the kitchen. He's standing by the counter with a glass of water. I ask if there's someone else. The question comes out smaller than I intended, almost a whisper. He looks at me like I've slapped him. "What? No, are you serious right now?" "I've seen receipts," I say. "Hotels, restaurant for 2, the phone." He puts the water down. He shakes his head. He tells me that I'm spiraling. He tells me that my job has made me paranoid, that I see deception everywhere because I spend all day looking for fraud. He tells me that I'm hurting him by suggesting he could do something like that. He tells me that my trust issues are going to destroy us. By the time he finishes, I'm the one who feels guilty. I'm the one who apologizes, and I'm the one who keeps my mouth shut for the next 2 months. But I don't stop keeping the log. November comes, and my mother calls me because I haven't answered their phone in days. When I pick up, her voice is tight with concern. "Honey, is everything okay?" I tell her yes, everything is fine, just busy with work. She knows I'm lying. Mothers have their own frequency sensors, I think, but she doesn't push. She just says, "Your sister mentioned you seemed distant at lunch." My chest tightens. What did she say? "Nothing specific," Mom says, "just that she was worried about you." I tell her everything is fine, and I mean it in the sense that I'm functioning. I'm going to work. I'm doing my job. I'm coming home and eating dinner and pretending that my marriage isn't a house of cards that I'm starting to build the evidence to topple. December arrives, and David mentions that he's been invited to a real estate conference in Vegas. It's in January, 5 days. He's hesitant when he brings it up, and I immediately know he's going to see her, whoever her is. But I don't confront him. Instead, I say it sounds nice. I say I hope he has a good time. I know he's confused by how easily I let him go. What I do is I wait for him to leave, and then I do something I've been thinking about for weeks. Something I know is legally questionable, but that I've justified to myself as necessary for protecting my own future. I hire a private investigator. Her name is Janet Morse. She's a woman in her late 50s who spent 15 years as a fraud detective before going private. I found her through a business contact, and I met with her in a coffee shop in the Pearl District. I came prepared with dates, times, location details, and a description of the woman I believe he's involved with. "I need to know if my husband is having an affair," I told her. "I need documentation. I need proof." Janet didn't judge me. She just pulled out a notebook and started asking questions. "Are you planning to divorce?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I need to know what I'm dealing with first." She nodded. "It'll run you $2,000 a week, maybe more depending on his schedule and how careful they are. If it's an affair, I'll find it. If it's something else, I'll find that too." "Okay," I said. "You sure?" Janet looked at me directly. "Once you know, you can't unknow it. You have to be ready for what that might mean for your life." I was ready. I'd been ready since the day he lied about the conversation that never happened. "I'm sure," I said. January arrives. David leaves for Vegas on a Thursday afternoon. I watch him pack, carefully, like he's going somewhere important, and I help him carry his bag to the car like a good wife. He kisses me goodbye. He says he'll miss me. His kiss tastes like a lie, and I've become fluent in that language. 3 hours after he leaves, Janet texts me a photo. It's David at a restaurant. Across from him is a woman with dark hair and an expensive-looking dress. She's looking at him like he's the only person in the entire world. He's looking at her the same way. I stare at the photo for a long time. Then I put my phone down and go back to work. Because the most important discovery I made that day wasn't that David was having an affair. It was the woman's face. I'd seen her before. I recognized her. And the recognition sent my mind spiraling backward through time, through memories, through moments I'd filed away and forgotten until suddenly they snapped into sharp focus. I left work early. I drove home. I went directly to the photo storage in David's office closet, the place where he kept old pictures and family documents. I found what I was looking for in a box from 2018, a professional photo from his real estate firm's holiday party. There she was, same woman, younger in the photo, but unmistakably the same. And next to her in the photo, his arm around her shoulders, was David. The label on the back read, David and Jennifer RC Realty Holiday Party, December 2018. Jennifer, his business partner. His business partner of 6 years. His business partner whose house he visited regularly under the guise of meetings. Whose text messages I'd probably scrolled past 100 times without really looking. Whose name appeared in his calendar so frequently that it had become invisible. His business partner who he'd failed to mention when I asked him point blank if there was someone else. I sat on the edge of our bed with the photograph in my hand, and something shifted inside me. Not broke, didn't shatter, shifted. Like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface, rearranging the landscape so slowly that no one would notice until the earthquake came. Janet sent me more photos over the next 3 days. David and Jennifer at a casino, at a spa, at a hotel, the same hotel, the one in Salem, at what looked like a couple's dinner with another man and a blonde woman I didn't recognize. That last photo was dated 6 months ago. They'd been doing this for 6 months, at least. I didn't confront him when he came back from Vegas. I did something smarter. I called my lawyer. Her name was Patricia Golds, and I'd met her at a bar association event that David had dragged me to. She was in her early 60s, with the kind of sharp eyes and sharper suits that came from decades of winning in courtrooms. I'd given her my business card. She'd given me hers. We'd chatted for 5 minutes and both moved on to other conversations. Now I was calling her with the most important question of my adult life. I need to understand my options, I said when we got on the phone. My husband is having an affair. I have documentation. I'm a higher earner than him, we own property jointly, and I need to understand what my exposure is. Patricia asked me good questions. How long had I been married? 7 years. Did we have a prenuptial agreement? No. Who owned the property? Both of us. What about retirement accounts? Mostly separate, as we'd kept our finances largely separate before marriage. Did he know that she knew? No. Here's what I recommend, Patricia said. Do nothing publicly. Do not confront him. Do not tell your family. Do not hint that you know anything. Continue operating exactly as you have been, a woman in a stable marriage who has no idea her husband is lying. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because in Oregon, we're a no-fault divorce state. That means his infidelity is, legally speaking, irrelevant. It doesn't affect property division. It doesn't affect custody arrangements if you had children. What it does do is make him angry, defensive, and likely to behave in ways that protect his interests before you protect yours. What should I do? First, I want you to document everything. Get copies of all financial statements. Pull credit reports. Find out exactly what assets you have. Find out where the money that's missing from your joint account has gone. Then we'll file quietly and strategically. The key is to catch him off guard before he has time to hide money or restructure his business interests. I understood. I was good at understanding strategy. Can you do that? Patricia asked. Yes, I said. I can absolutely do that. This is when I became someone else. It happened gradually enough that even I didn't notice it at first. I just noticed that I stopped feeling. The initial shock and pain of David's betrayal got filed away in the same part of my brain where I file case details for work. Interesting. Relevant, but not something that required an emotional response. I started spending more time at the office. I claimed it was a heavy caseload. It was partially true. But really, I was accessing financial databases, pulling copies of documents, working with vendors to get transaction histories. I was doing what I do best. I was following the money. David had been transferring money to an account under his name. I got a subpoena from Patricia and found out that the account was held at a small private bank that specialized in commercial real estate investors. The account showed regular deposits of cash, large deposits, sometimes $5,000, sometimes $10,000. No clear source documented. He was taking cash out of the business. He was hiding it. But where? I couldn't access his business bank account without a subpoena, and Patricia said that if I requested a subpoena now, it would tip my hand. So instead, I did something else. I asked David about business expansion. I was thinking, I said casually over dinner one night, that you could probably grow the firm. You and Jennifer have done well together. He looked at me with surprise. It was the first time I'd mentioned Jennifer's name to him since discovering the affair. Jennifer and I have actually been discussing that, he said slowly. We've found a property that might work for a new office. It's in Beaverton. We'd need to capitalize, though. It's a pretty significant investment. How significant? I asked. Maybe $200,000 to get started. We're looking at getting an investor or a second mortgage on the existing office property. I stored that information away. That sounds smart, I said. Real estate is a good investment. He relaxed, relieved that I wasn't upset about Jennifer. I was learning that David was simple in some ways. He wanted to be praised for his work. He wanted to feel like I supported his ambitions. As long as I provided that narrative, he would tell me what I needed to know. Over the next 6 weeks, I had 7 conversations with David about his business, his dreams, his financial strategies. In each one, I planted a question designed to get him to reveal information, and in each one, he answered because he trusted me. Because he thought I was stupid enough not to see what was in front of my face. In the meantime, I documented everything. I made copies of the photos Janet provided. I printed out the financial statements. I documented the dates and times of his late nights. I created a timeline. I created a spreadsheet. I did what I always do. I made the invisible visible. I made the chaos into clean, clear data. My mother called one evening when David was out. I considered not answering, but something made me pick up. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Honey, I've been worried about you. You sound different." "I'm fine," I said, "just tired." "David mentioned something to me the other day," she said carefully. "He said you'd been distant. He said you might be struggling with something work-related." My hands went cold. "When did he say that?" I asked. "Last week. I ran into him at the grocery store. He seemed concerned about you." David was preemptively setting a narrative. He was telling my mother that I was struggling, that I was distant, that there might be something mentally wrong with me. He was planting seeds that, when I eventually left him, would have already germinated. He was preparing his defense before I'd even made a move. It was brilliant, actually, strategic. It was something I would have been impressed by if I wasn't the target. "Mom, I need you to listen to me," I said quietly. "I can't say anything right now, but I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you, and I need you to believe me." "Okay," she said slowly. "David is not who you think he is. He's not a good man, but I can't explain it yet, and I need you not to tell him we had this conversation. Can you do that?" There was a long silence. "Sarah, what's happening?" "I promise I'll explain everything," I said. "But not yet, just trust me, please." She said she did, and then I hung up before I could say anything else that might tip him off. The thing about gaslighting is that it makes you question your own perceptions. Even though I had documentation, even though I had proof, some small part of me wondered if I was the one being unreasonable. If I was the one spiraling. If I was the one who couldn't be trusted to interpret reality correctly. That's why I needed the surgery. I needed a moment of isolation. I needed to be vulnerable and see who would show up for me. I needed to understand the true landscape of my family, because if I was going to do what I was planning to do, I needed to know exactly who was on my side. The surgery was scheduled for a Wednesday. Routine procedure. Shoulder arthroscopy to repair a labral tear I'd picked up from years of repetitive strain. The surgeon said I'd have pain management issues for a few weeks, but that full recovery was expected. I texted the group chat on a Tuesday night. Surgery's coming up. Just need someone there when I wake up. And I watched the silence spread like an infection through the 3 people I should have been able to rely on. My mother offered immediately. My sister said she had a work thing. My husband didn't respond. David didn't respond until 3 days later, when he casually mentioned he was booked for golf. And that's when I knew, with absolute certainty, that everyone I loved had made a choice. They had chosen something else over me. My sister because she was protecting someone, probably David, probably because he'd asked her to. My husband because he was already gone, already building a life with someone else, and my surgery was just an inconvenience to his schedule. And my mother, the only one who showed up, who sat by my hospital bed when I woke up groggy from anesthesia, was the only one I could trust. That realization was sharper than any surgical pain. I came home from the hospital on a Thursday. David had left me a sweet note on the kitchen counter. "Get well soon, love. You're going to be great." It was the kind of thing you'd write to a colleague you didn't particularly care about. I read it and felt nothing. The part of me that would have been hurt by that note had already been cauterized. My mother stayed with me for 3 days. She helped me with physical therapy, brought me food, sat with me in the mornings. She also carefully began to ask questions. "What's really going on?" she finally asked on the second evening, when David was out and we were alone in the living room. I told her everything. I showed her the photos from Janet. I showed her the spreadsheet of money transfers. I showed her the documentation of lies. I watched my mother's face go through a series of expressions: shock, anger, sadness, and finally, a kind of grim resolve. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to understand everything first," I said. "Then I want to leave him in a way that ensures he can't take anything from me, including the house." "How do you do that?" "I have a lawyer," I said, "and I have a plan, but I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to act like nothing is wrong. I need you to treat David like you always have. If he calls, if he reaches out, you smile and you're warm and you give no indication that you know anything. And I need you to talk to Michelle, and I need you to tell her that I know she knows something, and I need her to understand that she's either with me or against me." My mother looked at me for a long moment. "When did you become so tough?" she asked. "I'm not tough," I said. "I'm just done being a fool." The next 3 months were a master class in emotional compartmentalization. I went back to work. I continued my job. I smiled at company events. I was the same woman I'd always been on the surface, competent, stable, reliable. But underneath, I was moving pieces into place like a chess player, thinking 5 moves ahead. I went to therapy, which I documented carefully in case it came up in divorce proceedings. I wanted a paper trail showing that I was a woman seeking help, trying to understand her relationship, not a woman driven by rage or revenge. I met with Patricia regularly. I gave her everything I'd collected. She was impressed. "This is thorough," she said, flipping through the documents. "Very thorough. You've done good work." "I wanted to be prepared," I said. "You're more than prepared. I'm ready to move whenever you are." I asked her to wait. I told her I wanted to see what David would do next. I wanted to understand the full scope of his plans. That's when I discovered the bigger betrayal. I was doing laundry one afternoon, and a receipt fell out of David's jacket pocket. It was from a real estate agency in Beaverton. It was for a property listing, and the property was a 5-bedroom house with an asking price of $650,000. I ran the address. I found the listing online. The house had been listed 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks, which meant David had been looking at property with Jennifer while he was still married to me. I called Patricia immediately. "He's planning to buy a house," I said. With Jennifer." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "How certain are you?" "Completely. I have the receipt. I have the listing. I can check the title records, but I'm betting his name is going to be on an offer or a purchase agreement. Then we need to move, Patricia said. Now, because if he secures financing before we file, the house will be marital property and he'll have a claim to it. Can we prevent him from doing that? Once you file for divorce, a temporary restraining order will prevent him from transferring assets without both parties' consent. But we need to file first. We need to file before he does anything else. I took a breath. Okay, I said, let's do it. We filed on a Monday in April. I did it while David was at work. Patricia submitted the paperwork electronically. And then, and only then, did I do something I'd been planning for weeks. I called David at his office. Hi, David, I need you to come home, right now. What's wrong? Is everything okay? No, I said quietly. Nothing is okay. I need you to come home, please. He came home in under 20 minutes. He looked confused and concerned when he walked through the door. I was sitting at the kitchen table with an envelope in front of me. You've been served, I said calmly. Patricia Golds is my attorney. We filed for divorce this morning. The details are in that envelope. He looked at the envelope like it was a bomb. Sarah, what are you doing? What is this? It's a divorce, I said. You're having an affair with Jennifer. You've been transferring marital funds to a hidden account. You're planning to buy property with her. I have documentation of all of it. His face went white, then red. You're making a huge mistake, he said. Maybe, I said, but it's my mistake to make. He left the house that night. He didn't come back. Over the next week, I received 3 calls from him and 2 increasingly aggressive letters from his attorney, threatening countersuits and character assassination. He claimed I was unstable. He claimed I'd accessed his private accounts without authorization. He claimed I was the one who destroyed the marriage by being cold and unloving. It was all true in its way. I had become cold, but that was because he'd turned the temperature down first. The divorce process took 8 months. During those 8 months, I did things I'm not particularly proud of. I accessed financial records using information I'd obtained through less than ethical means. I recorded conversations without all parties' consent, which is legal in Oregon, a single-party consent state, but felt wrong anyway. I hired Janet again to document every movement David made, every place he went, every transaction he attempted. I was building a case not just for divorce, but for fraud, potential misappropriation of company funds, and possible embezzlement from his business. David fought hard. He hired an expensive attorney. He tried to paint me as obsessive and unstable. He tried to claim that the money transfers were legitimate business expenses. He tried to convince our mutual friends that I was the villain in this story. But I had documentation. I had receipts. I had receipts for the receipts. I had photos and timelines and financial records that painted a very specific picture. A man who'd been systematically lying to and defrauding his wife while conducting an affair with his business partner. The deposition was scheduled for July. I prepared for it the way I prepare for everything, carefully, methodically, obsessively. I created binders of documentation organized by category. I practiced my testimony in front of Patricia. I visualized the moment when David would have to sit across from me and answer questions under oath. The day of the deposition, I wore a navy suit and minimal makeup. I looked like exactly what I was, a competent, serious woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal and documented it with the precision of someone trained to find fraud. David looked like a man who was beginning to understand that he'd vastly underestimated his wife. Patricia started with the easy questions. My employment, my income, my knowledge of marital finances. Then she moved to the harder ones. Mr. Chen, she said, can you explain the $35,000 in transfers from the joint account to your personal business account between February and August of last year? He shifted in his chair. Those were business investments, he said. It's not unusual for... Were these investments discussed with your wife, the other owner of that account? Not in detail, but... That's a yes or no question. No, he said quietly. And can you explain the hotel receipt from Salem dated July 16th, which was charged to an American Express card registered to you? He looked at his attorney. His attorney made a note. David swallowed. I don't recall that transaction, he said. Patricia pulled out the receipt. She showed it to him. This is your card. This is your signature. This is a hotel room for 2 nights. Who stayed in that hotel room with you? He didn't answer. Patricia waited, letting the silence press against him. I'm not going to answer that question, he finally said. You're going to have to, Patricia said calmly. You're under oath, and if you refuse, we'll get the hotel to provide that information, which will then become part of the court record. So I'll ask again, who stayed in that hotel room with you? The muscles in David's jaw clenched. Jennifer Morgan, he said. And then, quietly, under his breath, I don't understand why you're making this so hard. I looked at him across the table, and I felt something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but maybe something in that direction. Pity. Pity for a man who'd had everything and thrown it away. Pity for a man who'd thought he was clever enough to get away with it. Pity for a man who'd vastly underestimated the woman he'd married. The settlement was reached in September. I got the house. I got 65% of the liquid assets. I got his acknowledgement that he'd been conducting an affair and had misappropriated marital funds. I got a document signed by him that could, if I chose to pursue it, be used as the basis for a civil claim. What I didn't get was an apology. I didn't get an explanation. I didn't get the satisfaction of him acknowledging what he'd done and why. But I got something better. I got my life back. The divorce was finalized on September 30th. That morning, I woke up in the house that was fully mine, no longer jointly owned, no longer a property shared with someone else, and I felt the first real moment of peace I'd experienced in over a year. My mother called that afternoon. How are you? She asked. I'm okay, I said, and I meant it. Are you going to be okay? She asked, which was a different question. Yes, I said, I think I will be. There's an epilogue to this story, though it's not the ending most revenge thrillers provide. David continued his relationship with Jennifer. They opened their new office in Beaverton. They bought the house I'd discovered in the real estate listing. They got married the following June. I know these things not because I'm stalking him. I'm not. But because my mother still keeps in touch with my sister, and my sister still keeps in touch with David's family, and information travels in small towns. He's alive in the network of gossip and family connection, doing well, doing exactly what he said he wanted to do. And I'm okay with that. The revenge I got wasn't the kind that feels good in the moment. It wasn't public humiliation. It wasn't him losing everything. It wasn't even the satisfaction of proving I was right all along, though I was. The revenge I got was simpler and sharper. I got out before he could take anything from me. I protected myself. I took care of myself in the way that matters most. I won the divorce. I won the property settlement. I won the right to a life that wasn't defined by his betrayal. 3 months after the divorce finalized, I ran into Jennifer at a coffee shop. She was alone, standing in line, looking at the menu board. She didn't recognize me, but I recognized her, and in that moment I felt no anger. I felt no desire for revenge. I felt only a kind of tired pity. She was going to find out eventually what kind of man she'd married. She was going to discover the same ways he lied, the same patterns of deception, the same careful construction of false narratives. And there was nothing I could do to warn her, nothing I should do. That was her journey to take. I ordered my coffee and left without speaking to her. The last thing I want to tell you is something I didn't understand until months after the divorce was finalized. The surgery text wasn't the beginning of my revenge. It was the end. The real revenge, the quiet, strategic, devastating revenge, was the year I spent documenting his lies. It was every conversation where I pretended not to know, every document I collected, every spreadsheet I created. It was the moment I decided that I was done being fooled, and from that moment forward, every action I took was calculated to protect myself and destroy his narrative. He thought I was the victim in this story. He thought I would cry and beg and ask him to come back. He thought I was too emotional, too trusting, too in love with the idea of marriage to fight back. What he didn't understand was that I'd already won before I even filed for divorce. I'd won the moment I called Patricia Golds. I'd won the moment I made the spreadsheet. I'd won every single time I smiled at him while knowing exactly what he was doing, who he was doing it with, and where he'd hidden the money. The real trick of revenge isn't beating your enemy. It's beating them so thoroughly that they don't even realize the game is over until you're already gone. My ex-husband learned that lesson the hard way. And I learned something more important. I was stronger than I thought. I was smarter than he was. And I was absolutely, completely capable of taking care of myself. That knowledge is worth more than any victory.